Nestled between rolling hills and endless wheat fields, there lived a boy named Benjamin Carter. He was the kind of kid everyone noticed, not for being loud or flashy, but for the genuine warmth in his smile and the spark in his hazel eyes. Yet beneath that infectious grin, Benjamin carried burdens far heavier than any 12-year-old should bear. Home was a weathered farmhouse on the edge of town, where Benjamin lived with his hard-working parents. His father, Daniel, spent sunrise to sunset working as a stone mason, his hands rough and calloused from years of labor. His mother, Sarah, took in sewing and alterations, her fingers dancing across fabric late into the night. Still, despite their relentless efforts, money remained scarce. Bills piled up like autumn leaves, and worry lines deepened on both their faces with each passing week. Every morning, Benjamin woke to whispered conversations drifting through thin walls. His parents spoke in hushed, anxious tones about overdue payments, dwindling savings, and the constant fear of losing their home. Though they tried to shield him from their struggles, Benjamin heard everything. He felt everything. At Riverside Middle School, Benjamin discovered he wasn't the only one fighting invisible battles. Marcus Riley, a quiet boy with thick-rimmed glasses and a noticeable limp, had become the favorite target of 3 older students who found cruel entertainment in making his life miserable. Benjamin watched from across the courtyard one afternoon as they surrounded Marcus, mocking his uneven gait and knocking his books to the ground. Something inside Benjamin snapped. He couldn't fix his family's problems, but this he could do something about. He walked straight up to the bullies, his heart hammering but his voice steady. "Leave him alone," Benjamin said firmly. "Find something better to do." The bullies, surprised by his boldness, muttered a few half-hearted insults before walking away. Marcus looked up, tears glistening behind his glasses, a mixture of shock and gratitude washing over his face. From that day forward, Benjamin and Marcus walked to school together. As their friendship grew, Marcus opened up about his own struggles, how his deteriorating vision made it nearly impossible to see the board in class, and how other students mocked him for squinting and stumbling. Benjamin listened with the kind of understanding that only comes from knowing what it's like to feel overwhelmed, but Benjamin had his own academic demons to battle. Mathematics, in particular, felt like trying to read a foreign language. Numbers swam across the page, equations made no sense, and no matter how hard he concentrated, the concepts slipped through his mind like water through a sieve. The anxiety about his family's situation made focusing even harder. One afternoon, Benjamin stayed after class and approached his teacher, Mrs. Patricia Reynolds, his voice trembling with vulnerability. "I don't understand any of this," he admitted. "I'm falling behind, and I'm scared I'll fail." Mrs. Reynolds smiled with the kind of kindness that makes you believe everything might actually be okay. "Asking for help is the bravest thing you can do," she told him. "Let's work through this together." And so they did. Week after week, Benjamin stayed after school for extra help. Mrs. Reynolds patiently guided him through problems, step by careful step, never making him feel stupid or inadequate. Slowly but surely, the fog began to clear. His grades improved, and more importantly, his confidence grew. Yet even as Benjamin found success in school, the weight of his family's financial crisis pressed heavier on his shoulders. He could see exhaustion etched into his parents' faces. They worked themselves to the bone, but it never seemed to be enough. One evening, Benjamin overheard his parents talking in the kitchen. His father's voice cracked with desperation. "We're 3 months behind on rent. Sarah, the landlord says if we don't pay by the end of the month, we're out." His mother's response was barely a whisper. "I don't know what else we can do, Daniel. We're already working every hour we can." Benjamin pressed his back against the wall outside the kitchen, tears streaming silently down his face. He felt utterly helpless, watching the 2 people he loved most in the world slowly crumble under pressure they couldn't control. Determined to help in any way possible, Benjamin started taking odd jobs around the neighborhood. He mowed lawns, walked dogs, delivered groceries, and cleaned out garages. Every dollar he earned went straight into a jar he kept hidden in his closet, meant for his parents. But even with his contributions, it barely made a dent. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. Walking home from school, Benjamin noticed a bright yellow poster taped to a telephone pole. Riverside Community Talent Showcase, grand prize $5,000. His breath caught in his throat. $5,000. That money could save his family. It could give them breathing room, pay off debts, secure their home. Benjamin ripped the poster down and ran home, bursting through the door with wild hope in his eyes. "Mom, Dad, look at this!" His parents read the poster, then exchanged worried glances. "Honey," his mother said gently, "what if you don't win? I don't want you to be disappointed." "I have to try," Benjamin insisted, his voice cracking with determination. "I can't just sit here and do nothing." After a long moment, his father nodded slowly. "All right, son. If this is what you want to do, we'll support you." Benjamin had been teaching himself guitar for the past 2 years, practicing in his room whenever he had spare time. Now he practiced with purpose. Every free moment was spent perfecting his fingering, strengthening his voice, and pouring his heart into a song he'd been writing, a song about struggle, hope, and never giving up. The night of the talent showcase arrived. The community center buzzed with excitement, packed with families, friends, and curious townspeople. Benjamin stood backstage, his guitar clutched tightly, his palms sweating, his heart racing like a runaway train. When his name was called, he stepped into the spotlight. The stage lights were blinding, the crowd a sea of expectant faces. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm him. Then he thought of his parents in the audience, of Marcus and Mrs. Reynolds, of everything he was fighting for. He began to play. The first notes rang out clear and pure. Then Benjamin opened his mouth and sang. Not perfectly, but authentically. His voice carried every ounce of pain, hope, and love he'd been holding inside. The song was raw and honest, a story of hardship and resilience that resonated with everyone in that room. By the time he struck the final chord, the entire audience sat in stunned silence. Then someone started clapping. And another. Within seconds, the room erupted into thunderous applause, a standing ovation that seemed to shake the very walls. When the judges announced the winners, Benjamin held his breath. Third place was called. Then second. His name wasn't mentioned for the grand prize. His heart sank. He'd failed. All that hope, all that effort, and it hadn't been enough. But then something unexpected happened. An elderly woman in the front row stood up. "That boy," she said, pointing at Benjamin, "has more courage than anyone I've ever seen." "He deserves our help," others began to nod and murmur in agreement. Within minutes, people were pulling out their wallets, passing around a hat. The gesture spread like wildfire through the crowd. The mayor stood and pledged a donation. Local business owners followed suit. Even strangers who'd never met the Carter family felt moved to contribute. By the end of the night, the community had raised over $7,000, more than the grand prize itself. Benjamin stood there, overwhelmed, as neighbors and strangers alike came forward to embrace him and his parents. His mother sobbed openly, clutching her son and husband. His father, that strong, silent stonemason, wiped tears from his weathered face. "You didn't just save our home," his mother whispered to Benjamin. "You reminded us that we're not alone." In the weeks and months that followed, life didn't become perfect. It never does. Challenges still arose, bills still needed paying, and worries still crept in during quiet moments. But the Carter family faced everything with renewed strength, knowing they had each other and a community that cared. Benjamin learned something profound that night. Sometimes winning isn't about coming in first. Sometimes it's about having the courage to stand up and try, knowing that vulnerability can be the strongest thing you show the world. And whenever life felt heavy again, Benjamin would pick up his guitar, close his eyes, and remember that night, the night his song changed everything. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real, because in the end, that's what people remember, not perfection, but honesty, not polish, but heart. And Benjamin Carter had plenty of both.